An AVG does not like my programs. Test manager has frozen. Isn't that lovely? Da, 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 da. Let's switch this screen for now. OBS won't even let me change scenes. Okay, well. Trying to see if there's actually anything I can fix at this moment. Operation can be completed. Access is denied. That is not a good thing to see. Okay, well. Why do I have... I had two VTube windows open. What the hell? Da da da. Da 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 da. Well, Cubs, this is highly annoying. As far as I'm aware, I haven't done anything that I know of that should upset the Fae. Maybe I did. I don't know. And there's people here. Hi, people. Just another one of those wonderful Friday nights, you know? Well, maybe it'll let me do something. Let's go back to the bookstore scene. If it'll load. Okay. I really need better free music in here. Because it's like, much as I like the mysterious moments, it's not always a mystery when I'm in the bookstore. The CPU still says it's going at 100%. Now I'm just nowhere to be seen. I really am trying to get things to work here. Okay. So, how has everyone else's week been? And by all means, please ignore the mess behind me. Probably. Okay. This isn't working half as well as it should be. Nope. Okay. My computer is still saying that it's using 100% of the CPU. I don't know why. It shouldn't be. Dang it, I lost my viewers. Oh well. You will be missed. I said, oh well, not LOL. But again, welcome to my actual library. This is where I do my streaming from. I know. Giving away all sense of fantasy and showing you the reality here. I don't see what the hell is going on. Hi, Guilty. Welcome in to the chaos that is my life. For some reason, my computer's acting up. I'm claiming that it's using 100% of my CPU. It says it's not using it yet. What the hell is taking up all the space? Oh well, Task Manager is not responding. Isn't that lovely? Hmm? Yeah. This is actually the room I stream from. Not nearly as impressive as my sets, but still. Okay, maybe I should go Discord. Oh, Chrome is freezing again. I'm just not having a convenient time today. This doesn't back to my viewers. What? Oh. My captions do not like what I say. Oh, my thumb popping was loud enough to peak the mic. That's crazy. Okay. Twitch is now saying that I have an excellent signal. And then that window crashes. So it says my CPU is at 100%. they can't really see what's going out, so we're already 11 minutes behind. So I'm going to shut down my browser window so I can't see anything on your guys' end. And we'll go ahead and go over to the library. Because one way or another, I'm going to get these stories read tonight. I'll just have to pay closer attention to OBS. So anyway, for those of you that are here, oh no, where's my person's not really. Oh, come on. Well, I guess you'll just have to deal with the sound of my wonderful voice. So, our first story for this fumbling Friday night of fairy tales, The Treasure Seeker. Once, long ago, in a little town, there lay in the midst of high hills. What the hell am I hearing now? Okay, I was hearing a pulse in my headset. Weird. Let's try this again. The Treasure Seeker. Once, long ago, in a little town that lay in the midst of high hills and wild forests, a party of shepherds sat one night in the kitchen of the inn, talking over old times, and telling of the strange things that they had befallen them in their youth. Presently up spoke the silver-haired Father Martin. "Comrades," he said, "I have had wonderful adventures, but I will tell you something still more astonishing that happened to myself. When I was a young lad, I had no home and no one to care for me, and I wandered from village to village all over the country with my knapsack on my back. But as soon as I was old enough, I took service with a shepherd in the mountains, and helped him for 3 years. One autumn evening, as we drove the flock homeward, 10 sheep were missing, and the master bade me to go and seek them in the forest. I took my dog with me, but he could find no trace of them, though we searched among the bushes till night fell. And then, as I did not know the country and could not find my way home in the dark, I decided to sleep under a tree. At midnight, my dog became uneasy and began to whine and creep close to me with his tail between his legs. By this, I knew that something was wrong, and looking about, I saw the bright moonlight, a figure standing beside me. It seemed to be a man with shaggy hair and a long beard which hung down to his knees. He had a garland upon his head and a girdle of oak leaves about his body, and carried an uprooted fir tree in his right hand. I shook like an aspen leaf at the sight, and my spirit quaked with fear. The strange being beckoned with his hand that I should follow him, but I did not stir from the spot. He spoke in a hoarse, grating voice. "Take courage, faint-hearted shepherd. I am the treasure seeker of the mountain. If you will come with me, you shall dig up much gold." Though I thought it was deadly cold with the terror, I plucked up my courage and said, "Get away from me, evil spirits! I do not desire your treasures." At this time the spectre grinned at my face and cried mockingly, "Simpleton, do you scorn your good fortune? Well, then remain a ragamuffin all your days." He turned to go away from me, then came back again and said, bethink yourself, rogue. I will fill your knapsack. I will fill your pouch." "Away from me, monster," I answered. "I will have nothing to do with you." When the apparition saw that I gave no heed to him, he ceased to urge me, saying only, "Someday you will rue this," and looked at me sadly, and then he cried, "Listen to what I say, and lay it well to heart. It may be of use to you when you come to your senses. A vast treasure of gold and precious stones lies in safety deep under the earth. At twilight, at high noon, it is hidden. But at midnight it may be dug up. For 700 years I have watched over it, and now my time has come. It is common property. Let him find it who can. So I thought to give it into your hand, having a kindness for you because you feed your flock upon my mountain." Thereupon the spectre told me exactly where the treasure lay, and how to find it. It might be only yesterday, so well do I remember every word he spoke. "Go towards the little mountains," he said, "and ask there for the Black King's Valley. And when you come to a tiny brook, follow the stream till you reach the stone bridge beside the sawmill. Do not cross the bridge, but keep to your right along the bank till a high rock stands before you. A bow shot from that, you will discover a little hollow, like a grave. When you find this hollow, dig it out, but it will be hard work, for the earth has been pressed down until with care. Still, work away till you find solid rock on all sides of you, and soon you will come to a square slab of stone. Force it out of the wall, and you will stand at the entrance of the treasure house. Into this opening you must crawl, holding a lamp in your mouth. Keep your hands free, lest you knock your nose against the stone, for the way is steep and the stones sharp. If it bruises your knees, never mind, you are on the road to fortune. Do not rest till you reach a wide stairway, down which you will go till you come into a spacious hall, in which there are 3 doors. 2 of them stand open, the third is fastened with locks and bolts of iron. Do not go through the door to the right, lest you disturb the bones of the lords of the treasure. Neither must you go through the door on the left. It leads to the snake's chamber, where adders and serpents lodge. But open the fast-closed door by means of the well-known spring-root, which you must not forget to take with you. And all your trouble will be for naught, for no crowbar or mortal tools will help you. If you want to procure the root, ask a wood seller. It is a common thing for hunters to need, and it is not hard to find. If the door bursts open suddenly, with the great crackings and groanings, do not be afraid. The noise is caused by the power of the magic root, and you will not be hurt. Now trim your lamp that it may not fail you, for you will be nearly blinded by the flash and glitter of the gold and precious stones in the walls and pillars of the vault. But beware how you stretch out your hand towards the jewels. In the midst of the cavern stands a copper chest, and that you will find gold and silver enough and to spare. and you may help yourself to your heart's content. If you take as much as you can carry, you will have sufficient to last your lifetime. You may return 3 times, but woe betide you if you venture to come a 4th time. You would have your trouble for your pains, and would be punished for your greediness by falling down the stone steps and breaking your leg. Do not neglect each time to heap back the loose earth which concealed the entrance to the king's treasure chamber. As the apparition left me speaking, my dog pricked up his ears and began to bark. I heard the crack of a carter's whip and the noise of wheels in the distance, and then I looked again, and the spectre had disappeared. So ended the shepherd's tale, and the landlord, who was listening with the rest, said shrewdly, "Tell us now, Father Martin, did you go to the mountain and find what the spirit promised you, or is it a fable?" "Nay, nay," answered the greybeard, "I cannot tell if the spectre lied, for never a step did I go towards the hollow, for 2 reasons. One, that my neck was too precious for me to risk it in the snare that was. The other, that no one ever could tell me where the spread root was to be found." Then Blaze, another aged shepherd, lifted his voice. "'Tis a pity, Father Martin, that your secret has grown old with you. If you had told it 40 years ago, truly you would not have been lacking in spread root. Even though you will never climb the mountain now, I will tell you, for a joke, how it is to be found. The easiest way to get it is by help of a black woodpecker. Look in the spring where she builds her nest in a hole in the tree. When the time comes for her to brood to fly off, block the entrance of the nest with hard sod, and lurk in ambush behind a tree till the bird returns to feed her nestlings. When she perceives that she cannot get into her nest, she will fly around the tree, uttering cries of distress, and then dart off towards the sun setting. When you see her do this, take a scarlet cloak, or if that be lacking for you, buy a few yards of scarlet cloth, and hurry back to the tree before the woodpecker returns with the spread root in her beak. So soon as she touches with the root the sod that blocks the nest, it will fly violently out of the hole. Then spread the red cloth quickly under the tree, so that the woodpecker may think it a fire, and in her horror drop the root. Some people will really light a fire, and a few sprinkled blossoms in it. That be a clumsy method, for if the flames do not shoot up at her right away, she will fly away, carrying the root with her." The party had listened with interest to the speech, but by the time it was ended, the hour was late, and they went their way homeward, leaving only one man who sat unheeded in the corner the whole event through. Thank you for the hydrate. Master Peter Blanche had once been a prosperous innkeeper and a master cook, but he had gone steadily down in the world for some time, and was now quite poor. Formerly he had been a merry fellow, fond of a joke, and the art of cooking had no equal in the town. He could make fish jelly, and quince fritters, and even wafer cakes, and gilded the ears of all his boars' heads. Peter had looked about him for a wife early in life, but unluckily his choice fell upon a woman whose evil tongue was well known in town. Lucy was hated by everyone, and the young folks would go miles out of the way rather than to meet her, for she had some ill word for everyone. Therefore, when Master Peter came along and let himself be taken in by her boasted skill as a housewife, he jumped at this offer, and they were married the next day. But they had not got home before the quarrel began. In the joy of his heart, Peter tasted freely of his own good wine, and as his bride hung upon him, he stumbled and fell, dragging her down with him, whereupon she beat him soundly, and the neighbors said that truly things did not promise well for Master Peter's comfort. Even when the ill-matched couple were presently blessed with children, his happiness was but short-lived, and the savage temper of his quarrelsome wife seemed to blight them from the first, and they died like little kids in the cool winter. Though Master Peter had no great wealth to leave behind him, still it was sad to him to be childless, and he would bemoan himself to his friends when he laid one baby after another in the grave, saying, "The lightning has been among the cherry blossoms again, so there will be no fruits to grow ripe." By and by he had a little daughter, so strong and healthy that neither her mother's temper nor her father's spoiling could keep her from growing up tall and beautiful. Meanwhile, the fortunes of the family had changed. From his youth up, Master Peter had hated trouble. When he had had money, he spent it freely and fed all the hungry folk who asked him for bread. If his pockets were empty, he borrowed from his neighbors, but he always took good care to prevent his scolding wife from finding out what he had done. His motto was, "It had all come right in the end," but what had come was to ruin for Master Peter. He was at his wits' end to know now how to earn an honest living, for try as he might, ill luck seemed to pursue him, and he lost one post after another, till at last all he could do was carry sacks of corn to the mill for his wife, who scolded him if he was slow about it, and grudged him his portion of food. This grieved the tender heart of his pretty daughter, who loved him dearly and was the comfort of his life. Peter was thinking of her as he sat in that inn corner and heard the shepherds talking about the buried treasure, and for her sake he resolved to go and seek for it. Before he rose from the landlord's armchair, his plan was made, and Master Peter went home more joyful and full of hope than he had been for many a long day. But on the way he suddenly remembered that he is not yet possessed of the magic spring root, and he stole into the house with a heavy heart and threw himself down on his hard straw bed. He could neither sleep nor rest, but as soon as it was light he got up and wrote down exactly all that was to be done to find the treasure, that he might not forget anything, and when it lay clear and plain before his eyes he comforted himself with that thought that, though he must do the rough work for his wife during one more winter least, he would not have to tread the path to the mill for the rest of his life. Soon he heard his wife's harsh voice singing in the morning song as she went to her household affairs, scolding her daughter all the while. She burst open the door while he was still dressing. "Come, Topper," was her greeting. "Have you been drinking all night, wasting money that you steal from my housekeeping? For shame, drunkard!" Master Peter, who was well used to this sort of talk, did not disturb himself, but waited till the storm blew over. Then he calmly said, "Do not be annoyed, dear wife. I have a good piece of business in which may turn out well for us." "You with good business?" she cried. "You are good for nothing but talk." "I am making my will," he said, "that when the hour comes my house may be in order." These unexpected words cut his daughter to the heart. She remembered that all night long she had dreamed of a newly dug grave, and at this moment she woke out into loud lamentations. But her mother only cried, "Wretch, have you not wasted goods and possessions? And now you do talk about making a will!" And she seized him like a fury and tried to scratch out his eyes, and by the quarrel was patched up, and everything went as before. From that day Peter saved up every penny that his daughter Lucia gave him on the sly, and bribed the boys of his acquaintance to spy out a black woodpecker's neck for him. Next he sent them into the woods and fields, but instead of looking for a nest, they only played pranks on him. They led him miles over hill and vale, stock and stone, to find the raven's brood, or a nest of squirrels in a hollow tree, and when he was angry with them, they laughed at his face and ran away. This went for some time, But the last one of the boys spied a woodpecker in the meadowlands among the wood pigeons, and when he found her nests in half a dead alder tree, he came running to Peter with the news of his discovery. Peter could hardly believe his good fortune, and went quickly to see for himself it was true. When he reached the tree, there certainly was a bird flying in and out of it, if she had a nest in it. Peter was overjoyed at this fortunate discovery, and instantly set himself to obtain a red cloak. Now in the whole town there was only one red cloak, and that belonged to a man of whom nobody ever willingly asked a favor. Master Hammerling, the hangman. It cost Peter many struggles before he could bring himself to visit such a person, but there was no help for it, and, little as he liked it, he ended up making this request on the hangman, who was flattered that so respectable a man as Peter should borrow his robe of office, and willingly lent it to him. Peter now had all that was necessary to secure the magic root. He stopped in the entrance of the nest, and everything fell out exactly as Blaze had foretold. As soon as the woodpecker came back with the root in her beak, out rushed Master Peter from behind a tree, and displayed the fire-red cloak so adroitly that it terrified the bird, dropping the root where it had been easily seen. All Peter's plans had succeeded, and he actually held in his hand the magic root, that master key which would unlock all doors and bring to its possessor unheard of luck. His thoughts now turned to the mountain. He secretly made preparations for his journey. He took with him only a staff, a strong sack, and a little box which his daughter Lucia had given him. It happened that on the very day Peter had chosen for setting out, Lucia and her mother went off early to the town, leaving him to guard the house. But in spite of that, he was on the point of taking his departure when it occurred to him that it might be as well first to test the much-vaunted powers of the magic root for himself. Dame Ilse had a strong cupboard with 7 locks built into the wall of her room, in which she kept all the money she had saved, and she wore the key of it always hung around her neck. Master Peter had no control at all of the money affairs of the household, so the contents of the secret hoard were quite unknown to him, and this seemed to be a good opportunity for finding out what they were. He held the magic root to the keyhole, and to his astonishment heard all 7 locks creaking and turning. The door flew suddenly wide open, and his greedy wife's store of gold pieces lay before his eyes. Thank you for the other drink. He stood still in sheer amazement, not knowing which to rejoice over more, this unexpected find, or the proof that the magic root's power was real. But at last he remembered it was quite time to be starting on his journey. So, filling his pockets with the gold, he carefully locked the empty cupboard again, and left the house without further delay. When Dame Ilse and her daughter returned, they wondered to find the house door shut, and Master Peter nowhere to be seen. They knocked and called, but nothing stirred within the house but a cat, and at last the blacksmith had to be fetched to open the door. Then the house was searched from garret to cellar, but no Master Peter was to be found. "Who knows?" cried Dame Ilse at last. "The wretch may have been found idling in some tavern since early morning." Then a sudden thought startled her, and she felt for her keys. Suppose they had fallen into the good-for-nothing husband's hands, and he had helped himself to her treasure. But no, the keys were safe in their usual place, and the cupboard looked quite untouched. Midday came, then evening, then midnight, and still no Master Peter appeared, and the matter became really serious. Dame Ilse knew right well what a torment she had been to her husband, and remorse caused her the gloomiest forebodings. "Ah, Lucia," she cried, "I greatly fear that your father has done himself a mischief." And they sat till morning, weeping over their own fancies. As soon as it was light, they searched every corner of the house again, and examined every nail in the wall and every beam. But luckily, Master Peter was not hanging from any of them. After that, the neighbors went out with long poles to fish in every ditch and pond, but they found nothing. Then Dame Ilse gave up the idea of ever seeing her husband again, and very soon consoled herself, only wondering how the sacks of corn were to be carried to the mill in the future. She decided to buy a strong ass to do the work, and having chosen one, and after some bargaining with the owner at its price, she went to the cupboard in the wall to fetch the money. But what were her feelings when she perceived that every shelf lay empty and bare before her? For a moment she stood bewildered, then broke into such frightful ravings that Lucia ran to her in alarm. But as soon as she heard of the disappearance of the money, she was heartily glad, and no longer feared that her father had come to any harm, but understood that he must have gone out into the world to seek his fortune in some new way. About a month after this, someone knocked at Dame Ilse's door one day, and she went to see if it was a customer for meal, but in stepped a handsome young man, just like a duke's son, who greeted her respectfully, and asked after her pretty daughter, as if he were an old friend, though she could not remember having set her eyes on him ever before. However, she invited him to step into the house and to be seated while he unfolded his business. With a great air of mystery, he begged permission to speak to the fair Lucia, of whose skill of needlework he had heard much about, and had a great commission to give her. Dame Ilse had her own opinion of what kind of commission it was likely to be, brought by a young stranger to a pretty maiden. However, as a meeting would be under her own eye, she made no objection, but called her industrious daughter, who left off working and came obediently. But when she saw the stranger, she stopped short, blushing, and cast down her eyes. He looked at her fondly and took her hand, which she tried to draw away, crying, "Oh, Freeling, were you here? I thought you were 100 miles away, and you come to grieve me again." "No, dearest girl," he answered. "I've come to complete your happiness and my own. Since we last met, my fortune is utterly changed. I'm no longer a poor vagabond that I was then. My rich uncle has died, leaving me money and goods in plenty, so that I dare to present myself to your mother as a suitor for your hand. That I love you, I know well. If you can love me, I am indeed a happy man." Lucia's pretty blue eyes had looked up shyly as he spoke, and now a smile parted her rosy lips, and she stole a glance at her mother to see what she thought about it all. But the dame stood lost in amazement to find that her daughter, whom she could have declared had never been out of her sight, was already quite acquainted with the handsome stranger, and quite willing to be his bride. Before she had done staring, this hasty wooer had smoothed his way by covering the shining table with gold pieces as a wedding gift to the bride's mother, and had filled Lucia's apron into the bargain, after which the dame made no difficulties, and the matter was speedily settled. While Oos gathered up the gold and hid it away safely, the lovers whispered together, and what Friedlin told her seemed to make Lucia every moment more happy and contented. Now a great hurly-burly began in the house, and preparations for the wedding went to be made. A few days later, a heavy laden wagon drove up, and out of it came so many boxes and bales that Dame Elise was lost in wonder at the wealth of her future son-in-law. The day of the wedding was chosen, and all their friends and neighbors were bidden to the feast. And as Lucia was trying on her bridal wreath, she said to her mother, "This wedding garland would please me indeed if Father Peter could lead me to the church. If only he would come back again. Here we are rolling in riches, Will he be nibbling at a hunter's table? And the very idea of such a thing made her weep, while even Dame Elise said, I should like to be sorry myself to see him come back. There's always something lacking in a house when the good man is away. But the fact that she was growing quite tired of having no one to scold. And what do you think happened? On the very eve of the wedding, a man pushing a wheelbarrow arrived at the city gate and paid toll upon a barrel of nails which it contained, and then made the best of his way to the bride's wedding and knocked at the door. The bride herself peeped out of the window to see who it could be, and there stood her father, Peter. There was a great rejoicing in the house. Lucia ran to embrace him, and even Dame Ilse held out her hand in welcome, and said only, Ro, mend your ways. And when she remembered the empty treasure cupboard, Father Peter greeted the bridegroom and looked at him shrewdly, while the mother and daughter hastened to say all they knew in his favor, and appeared to be satisfied with him as his soon son-in-law. Dame Ilse had something set to eat before her husband. She was curious to hear of his adventures, and questioned him eagerly as to why he had gone away. God bless my native place, he said. I've been marching through the country and have tried every kind of work, but now I have found a job in the iron trade, only so far, but I have put into that as I have earned. This barrel of nails is my whole fortune, which I wish to give as my contribution towards the bride's house furnishing. This speech roused Dame Elise to anger, and she broke out in such shrill reproaches that the bystanders were fairly deafened, and Friedland hastily offered Master Peter a home with Lucia and himself, promising that he should live in comfort and be always welcome. So Lucia had her heart's desire, and Father Peter led her to the church next day, and the marriage took place very happily. Soon afterwards, the young people settled into a fine house which Friedland had bought, and had a garden and meadows and fish pond and a hill covered with vines, and were as happy as the day was long. Father Peter also stayed quietly with them, living, as everybody believed, upon the generosity of his rich son-in-law. No one suspected his barrel of nails was a real horn of plenty from which all this prosperity flowed. Peter had made the journey to the treasure mountain successfully, without being found out by anybody. He had enjoyed himself by the way, and had taken his own time until he actually reached a little brook in the valley, which it had cost him some trouble to find. Then he pressed on eagerly, and soon came to a little hollow in the wood. Down he went, burrowing like a mole into the earth. The magic root did its work, and at last the treasure lay before his eyes. You may imagine how gaily Peter filled his sack with as much gold as he could carry, and how he staggered up the 77 steps with a full heart of hope and delight. He did not quite trust the gnome's promises of safety, and was in such haste to find himself once more in the light of day, that he looked neither to the right nor to the left, and could not afterwards remember whether the walls and pillars had sparks with jewels or not. However, all went well. He neither saw nor heard anything alarming. The only thing that happened was that the great iron-barred door shut with a crash as soon as he was fairly outside it, and then he remembered that he had left the magic root behind, so he could not go back for another load of treasure. But even that did not trouble Peter much. He was quite satisfied with what he had already. After he had already done everything according to Father Martin's instructions, pressed the earth down back into the hollow, he sat down to consider how he could bring his treasure back to his native land, and enjoy it there without being forced to share it with his scolding wife, who would give him no peace if she found out about it. At last, after much thinking, he hit upon a plan. He carried his sack to the nearest village, and there bought a wheelbarrow, a strong barrel, and a quantity of nails. He packed his gold into the barrel, and covered it with a layer of nails, and hoisted onto the wheelbarrow with some difficulty, and set off with it upon his wayward home. One place upon the road he met a handsome young man who seemed by his downcast air to be in some great trouble. Father Peter, who wished everybody to be as happy as he was himself, greeted him cheerfully and asked where he was going, to which he answered sadly, "Into the world, good father, and out of it, wherever my feet may chance to carry me." "Why out of it?" said Peter. "What in the world has been doing to you now?" "It has done nothing to me, nor I it," replied the boy. "Nevertheless, there's not anything left in it for me." Father Peter did his best to cheer the young man up, and invited him to sup with him at the first inn they came to, thinking that perhaps hunger and poverty were causing the stranger's trouble. But when good food was set before him, he seemed to forget to eat. So Peter perceived that what ailed his guest was sorrow of the heart, and asked him kindly to tell his story. "Where's the good, father?" he said. "You can give me neither help nor comfort." "Who knows?" answered Master Peter. "I might be able to do something for you. Often after in life, help comes to us from an unexpected quarter." The young man, thus encouraged, began his tale. "I am," he said, "a crossbowman in the service of a noble count, whose castle I was brought up. Not long ago my master went on a journey, and brought back with him, amongst his treasures, the portrait of a fair maiden, so sweet and lovely that I lost my heart at first sight of it, and could think of nothing but how I might seek her out to marry her. The count had told me her name and where she lived, but laughed at my love, and absolutely refused to give me leave to go in search of her. So I was forced to run away from the castle by night, and soon reached the little town where the maiden dwelt. But there fresh difficulties waited me. She lived under the care of her mother, who was so severe that she was never allowed to look out the window, or set foot outside the door alone. And how to make friends with her I did not know. But at last I dressed myself as an old woman and knocked boldly at the door. The lovely maiden herself opened it, and so charmed me that I came near to forgetting my disguise, and I soon recovered my wits and begged her to work a fine tablecloth for me, for she is reported to be the best needlewoman in all the country around. Now I was free to go and see her often under the pretense of seeing how the work was going, and one day, when her mother had gone out of town, I ventured to throw off my disguise and tell her of my love. She was startled at first, but I persuaded her to listen to me, and I soon saw that I was not displeasing to her, though she scolded me gently for my disobedience to my master, and my deceit in disguising myself. But when I begged her to marry me, she told me sadly that her mother would scorn a penniless wooer, and implored me to go away at once, lest trouble should befall upon us. Bitter as it was to me, I was forced to go when she bade me, and have wandered about ever since, with grief gnawing at my heart, for how can a masterless man, without money or gold, ever hope to win the lovely Lucia?" Master Peter, who had been listening attentively, pricked up his ears at the sound of his daughter's name, and very soon found out that it was indeed with her this young man was deeply in love. "Your story is strange indeed," he said, "but where is the fatherless maiden? Why do you not ask for him for her hand? He might take your part, and be glad to have you as a son-in-law." "Alas," said the young man, "her father is a wandering good-for-nothing, who has forsaken wife and child and gone off, who knows where. The wife complains of him bitterly enough, and scolds my dear maiden when she takes her father's part." Father Peter was somewhat amused by the speech, but he liked the young man well, and saw that he was the very person he needed to enable him to enjoy his wealth in peace, without being separated from his dear daughter. "If you will take my advice," he said, "I promise that you shall have this maiden to marry whom you love so much, and that before you are many days older." "Comrade," said Friedlin indignantly, for he thought Peter did jest with him, "it is ill done to mock me, an unhappy man. You had better find someone else to let himself be taken in with your fine promises." And he sprung up, and was going off hastily when Master Peter caught him by the arm. "Stay, hothead," he cried. "It is no jest, and I am prepared to make good on my words." Thereupon he showed him the treasure hidden under the nails, and unfolded to him his plan, which that was that Friedland should play the part of a rich son-in-law, and keep a still tongue, that he might enjoy their wealth together in peace. The young man was overjoyed at the sudden change in his fortunes, and did not know how to thank Father Peter for his generosity. They took the road again at dawn, and next morning, and soon reached the town where Friedland equipped himself as a glad wooer should. Father Peter filled his pockets with gold for the wedding dowry, and agreed with him that when all was settled, he should secretly send word that Peter might send off the wagon load of house plenishings, with which the rich bridegroom was to make such a stir in the little town where the bride lived. They parted after Peter's last command to Friedland were to guard the secret well, and not even tell it to Lucia till she was his wife. Master Peter long enjoyed the profits of his journey to the mountain, and no rumor of it had been abroad. In his old age, prosperity was so great that he himself did not know how rich he was, but it was always supposed that the money was Friedland's. He and his beloved wife lived in great happiness and peace, and rose to great honor in the town. And to this day, when the citizens wish to describe a wealthy man, they say, "As rich as Peter Block's son-in-law." Okay. That was a long and confusing story. And we have sadly wasted enough time that ads are about to start. So, see you in a few. I have no idea where the cats are hiding. I just don't want to be on camera, I guess. Oh well. I mean, can you really blame them for not wanting to be on camera? I can't. Ugh. I'm sorry for all the coughing. I'm just drinking regular water instead of like hot tea or something tonight. It's too hot in this area, so. Damn. Sorry about that. But let's get back over to the library, shall we? That page was 13 pages long. That story was 13 pages long. Yeah, I can't speak right tonight. But anyway, this next story isn't nearly as long. Let's see if the library sounds back yet. Okay. It says my library sounds are working. Anyway, our next story for this, I'll just say fumbling Friday night again, for the fairies. The Cottager and his cat. Once upon a time, there lived an old man and his wife in a dirty, tumble-down cottage, not very far from a splendid palace where the king and the queen dwelt. In spite of their wretched state in the hut, which many people declared was too bad even for a pig to live in, the old man was very rich, for he was a great miser, and lucky besides, and would often go without food all day sooner than change one of his beloved gold pieces. But after a while he found that he starved himself once too often, and he fell ill, and had no strength to get well again, and in a few days he died, leaving his wife and one son behind him. The night following his death, the son dreamed that an unknown man appeared to him and said, "Listen to me, your father is dead, and your mother will soon die, and all the riches will belong to you. Half of this wealth is ill-gotten, and this you must give back to the poor from whom he squeezed it. The other half you must throw into the sea. Watch, however, as the money sinks into the water, and if anything should swim, catch it and keep it, even if it is nothing more than a bit of paper." And then the man vanished, and the youth awoke. The remembrance of this dream troubled him greatly. He did not want to part with the riches that his father had left him, for he had known all his life what it was to be cold and hungry, and now he had hoped for a little comfort and pleasure. Still, he was honest and good-hearted, and if his father had come wrongfully into his wealth, he felt he could never enjoy it, and at last he made up his mind to do as he was bidden. He found out who the people were who were the poorest in the village, and spent half of his money in helping them, and put the other half he put in his pocket. From a rock that jutted out into the sea he flung it in. In a moment it was out of sight, and no man could have told the spot where it had sunk, except for a tiny scrap of paper floating on the water. He stretched down carefully and managed to reach it, and on opening it, he found 6 shillings wrapped inside. This was all the money he now had in the world. The young man stood and looked at it thoughtfully. "Well, I can't do much with this," he said to himself. "After all, 6 shillings were better than nothing," and he wrapped them up again and slipped them into his coat. He worked in his garden for the next few weeks, and he and his mother contrived to live on the fruit and vegetables that he got out of it. And then she too died suddenly. The poor fellow felt very sad when he had laid her in her grave, and with a heavy heart he wandered into the forest, not knowing where he was going. By and by he began to get rather hungry, and seeing a small hut in front of him, he knocked on the door and asked if they could give him some milk. The old woman who opened it begged him to come in, adding kindly that if he wanted a night's sludging, he might have it without costing him anything. 2 women and 3 men were at supper when he entered, and silently made room for him to sit down by them. When he had eaten, he began to look about him, and was surprised to see an animal sitting by the fire, different from anything he had ever noticed before. It was gray in color, and not very big, but its eyes were large and very bright, and it seemed to be singing in an odd way, unlike any animal in the forest. "What is the name of that strange little creature?" he asked, and they answered, "We call it a cat." "I should like to buy it if it is not too dear," said the young man. "It could accompany me for a while." And they told him that he might have it for 6 shillings, if he cared to give so much. The young man took out his precious bit of paper and handed them the 6 shillings, and the next morning bade them farewell, with the cat lying snugly in his cloak. For the whole day they wandered through the meadows and forests, till in the evening they reached a house. The young fellow knocked at the door and asked the old man who opened it if he could rest that night, adding that he had no money to pay for it. "Then I must give it to you," answered the man, and led him into a room where 2 women and 2 men were sitting at supper. One of the women was an old man's wife, the other his daughter. He placed the cat on the mantel-shelf, and they crowded around to examine this strange beast, and the cat rubbed itself against them and held out its paw and sang to them, and the women were delighted and gave it everything a cat could eat, and a great deal more besides. After hearing the youth's story and how he had nothing in the world left him except for his cat, the old man advised him to go to the palace, which was only a few miles distant, to take counsel with the king, who was kind with everyone and would certainly be his friend. The young man thanked him and said he would gladly take his advice, and early next morning he set out for the royal palace. He sent a message to the king to beg for an audience, and received a reply that he was to go into the great hall, where he would find his majesty. The king was at dinner with his court when the young man entered, and he signed him to come near. The youth bowed, and then gazed in surprise at the crowd of little black creatures who were running about the floor, and even on the table itself. Indeed, they were so bold that they snatched pieces of food from the king's own plate, and if he drove them away, tried to bite his hands, so that he could not eat his food, and his courtiers fared no better. "What sort of animals are these?" asked the youth of one of the ladies sitting next to him. "They're called rats," said the king, who had overheard the question, "and for years we have tried to find some way of putting an end to them, but it is impossible. They come into our very beds." At this moment something was seen flying through the air. The cat was on the table, and with 2 or 3 shakes a number of rats were lying dead around him. Then a great scuffling of feet was heard, and in a few minutes the hall was clear. For some minutes the king and his courtiers only looked at each other in astonishment. "What kind of animal is that which can work magic of this sort?" said he, and the young man told him that it was called a cat, and that he had bought it for 6 shillings. And the king answered, "Because of the luck you have brought me in freeing my palace from the plague which tormented me for many years, I shall give you the choice of 2 things. Either you shall be my prime minister, or else you shall marry my daughter and reign after me. Say, which shall it be?" "The princess in the kingdom," said the young man. And so it was. So apparently, that's when cats had come to Europe. Uncursed folks motion. Okay. So our next story for the fairies, for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales, the prince who would seek immortality. Once upon a time, in the very middle of a large kingdom, there was a town, and in the town a palace, and in the palace a king. The king had one son whom his father thought was wiser and cleverer than any son ever was before, and indeed his father had spared no pains to make him so. He had been given very careful in choosing his tutors and governors when he was a boy, and when he became a youth he sent him to travel so that he might see the ways of other people, and find that they were often as good as his own. It was now a year since the prince had returned home, for his father felt that it was time that his son should learn how to rule the kingdom which would be his one day. But during his long absence, the prince seemed to have changed his character altogether. From being a merry and light-hearted boy, he had grown into a gloomy and thoughtful man. The king knew of nothing that could be producing such an altercation. He vexed himself about it from morning till night, till at length an explanation occurred to him. The young man was in love. Now the prince never talked about his feelings. For the matter of that, he scarcely talked at all, and the father knew that if he was to come to the bottom of the prince's dismal face, he would have to begin. So one day after dinner he took his son by the arm and led him into another room, hung entirely with pictures of beautiful maidens, each one more lovely than the other. "My dear boy," he said, "you are very sad. Perhaps after all your wanderings it is dull for you here all alone with me. It would be much better if you should marry. And I have collected these portraits of the most beautiful women in the world, of a rank equal to your own. Choose which among them you would like for a wife, and I will send an embassy to her father to ask for her hand." "Alas, your majesty," answered the prince, "it is not love or marriage that makes me so gloomy, but the thought, which haunts me day and night, that all men kings and must die. Never shall be happy again until I found a kingdom where death is unknown, and I have determined to give myself no rest until I've discovered the land of immortality." The old king heard him with dismay. Things were worse than he thought. He tried to reason with his son, and told him that during all of these years he had been looking forward to his return, in order to resign his throne and its cares, which pressed so heavily upon him. But it was in vain that he talked. The prince would listen to nothing, and the following morning buckled on his sword and set forth on his journey. He had been traveling for many days, and had left his fatherland behind him. When close to the road he came upon a huge tree, and on its topmost bough an eagle was sitting, shaking the branches with all his might. This seemed so strange and so unlike an eagle that the prince stood still with surprise, and the bird saw him and flew to the ground. The moment its feet touched the ground, he changed into a king. "Why do you look so astonished?" he asked. "I was wondering why you shook the bough so fiercely," answered the prince. "I am condemned to do this, for neither I nor any of my kindred can die until I have uprooted this great tree," replied the king of eagles. "But it is now evening, and I need work no more today. Come to my house with me, and be my guest for the night." The prince accepted gratefully the eagle's invitation, for he was tired and quite hungry. They were received at the palace by the king's beautiful daughter, who gave the orders the dinner should be laid before them at once. While they were eating, the eagle questioned his guest about his travels, and if he was wandering for pleasure's sake or with a special aim. The prince told him everything, and how he could never turn back till he had discovered the land of immortality. "Dear brother," said the eagle, "I have discovered it already, and it rejoices my heart to think that you will stay with us. Have you not just heard me say that death has no power over myself or any in my kindred until the great tree is toppled? It will take me 600 years' hard work to do that, so my daughter, and let us all be happily living ever after. After all, 600 years is an eternity." "Ah, dear king," replied the man, "your offer is very tempting, but at the end of 600 years we should have to die, and so we will be no better off. No, I must go on till I find the country where there's no death at all." Then the princess spoke, and she tried to persuade the guest to change his mind, but he sorrowfully shook his head. At length, seeing his resolution was firmly fixed, she took from a cabinet a little box which contained her picture, and gave it to him, saying, "As you will not stay with us, prince, accept this box, which will sometimes recall us to your memory. If you are tired of traveling before you come to the land of immortality, open this box and look at my picture, and you will be borne along either on earth or the air, quick as thought, or swift as a whirlwind." The prince thanked her for her gift, which he placed in his tunic, and sorrowfully bade the eagle and his daughter farewell. Now was any present in the world as useful as that little box, and many times he did bless the kind thought of the princess. One evening it carried him to the top of a high mountain, where he saw a man with a bald head busily engaging in digging up spadefuls of earth and throwing them into a basket. When the basket was full, he took it away, and returned with an empty one, which he likewise filled. The prince stood and watched him for a little, till the bald man looked up and said to him, "Dear brother, what surprises you so much?" "I was wondering why you were filling the basket," replied the prince. "Oh," replied the man, "I'm condemned to do this, for neither I nor many of my family can die until I've dug away a hole through this mountain and made it level with the plain. But come, it's almost dark, and I shall work no longer." And he plucked a leaf from a tree close by, and from the rough digger he was changed into a stately bald-headed king. "Come with me," he said. "You must be tired and hungry, and my daughter will have supper ready for us." The prince gladly accepted, and they went back to the palace where the bald-headed king's daughter was, who was more beautiful than the other princesses, welcomed them at the door, and led them into a large hall to a table covered with silver dishes. While they were eating, the bald-headed king asked the prince how he had happened to wander so far, and the young man told him all about it, and how he was seeking the land of immortality. "You have already found it already," answered the king, "for as I said, neither I nor my family can die until I have leveled this great mountain, and that will take a full 800 years. Stay here with us and marry my daughter. 800 years is surely long enough to live." "Oh, certainly," answered the prince, "but all the same, I'd rather go and seek the land where there's no death at all." So the next morning he bade them farewell, though the prince begged him to stay with her all night. And when she found that she could not persuade him, she gave him a remembrance of a gold ring. This ring was still more useful than the box, because when one wished oneself at any place, there was directly, without even the trouble of flying it through the air. The prince put it on his finger, and thanked her heartily, and went on his way. He walked on for some time, and then recollected the ring, and thought he would try if the princess had truly spoken of its powers. "I wish I was at the end of the world," he said, shutting his eyes. When he opened them, he was standing in a street full of marble places. The men who passed him were tall and strong, and their clothes were magnificent. He stopped some of them and asked in all the 27 languages that he knew what the name of the city. but no one answered him. Then his heart sank within him. What should he do in a strange place if nobody could understand anything? He said. Suddenly his eyes fell upon a man dressed in the fashion of his native country. He ran up to him and spoke to him in his own tongue. "What is the city, my friend?" he inquired. "It is the capital of the Blue Kingdom," replied the man. "But the king himself is dead, and his daughter is now the ruler." With this news the prince was satisfied, and begged his countrymen to show him the way to the young queen's palace. The man led him through several streets in a large square, one side of which was occupied by a splendid building that seemed borne up on splendid pillars of soft green marble. In front was a flight of steps, and on these the queen was sitting, wrapped in a veil of shining silver mist, listening to the complaints of her people, and dealing out justice. When the prince came up, she saw directly that he was no ordinary man, and telling her chamberlain to dismiss the rest of her petitioners for the day, she signed to the prince to follow her into the palace. Luckily, she had been taught his language as a child, so they had no difficulty in talking to each other. The prince told her all of his story, and how he was journeying to find the land of immortality. When he had finished, the princess, who had listened attentively, rose, and taking his arm, led him to the door of another room, the floor of which was made entirely of needles, stuck so close together that there was not room for a single needle more. "Prince," she said, turning to him, "you see these needles? Well, know that neither I nor any of my family can die till I have worn out these needles and sewing. It will take at least 1,000 years for that. Stay here and share my throne. 1,000 years is a long life to live." "Certainly," he answered. "Still, at the end of 1,000 years I should have to die. No, I must find the land where there is no death." The queen did all she could to persuade him to stay, but her words proved useless. At length she gave it up. Then she said to him, "As you will not stay, take this little goldenrod as a remembrance of me. It has the power to become anything you wish it to be when you are in need." So the prince thanked her, and putting the rod in his pocket, he went on his way. Scarcely had he left the town behind him when he came to a broad river which no man might pass, for he was standing at the end of the world, and this was a river which flowed around it. Not knowing what to do next, he walked a little distance up the bank, and there, over his head, a beautiful city was floating in the air. He longed to get to it, but how? Neither road nor bridge was anywhere to be seen, yet the city drew him upwards, and he felt that there at last was a country he sought. Suddenly he remembered the golden rod which the mist-veiled queen had given him. With a beating heart he flung it to the ground, wishing with all his might that it might turn into a bridge, fearing that, after all, this might prove beyond its power. But no, instead of a rod, there stood a golden ladder, leading straight up to the city in the air. He was about to enter the golden gates when there sprang up at him a wonderful beast who, like he had none other seen. "Out, sword from the sheath!" cried the prince, springing back with a cry, and the sword leapt from his scabbard and cut off some of the monster's heads, but others grew again quickly, so that the prince, pale with terror, stood where he was, calling out for help, and put his sword back into the sheath again. The queen of the city heard the noise and looked from her windows to see what was happening, and summoning one of her servants, she bade him go and rescue the stranger and bring him to her. The prince thankfully obeyed her orders and entered her presence. The moment she looked at him, the queen felt that he was no ordinary man, and she welcomed him graciously and asked him what had brought him to the city. In answer, the prince told all his story, and how he had traveled long and far in search of the land of immortality. "You have found it," she said, "for I am the queen over life and death. Here you can dwell among the immortals." 1,000 years had passed since the prince first entered the city, but they had flown so fast that the time seemed no more than 6 months. There had not been one instant of those 1,000 years that the prince was not happy, until one night he dreamed of his father and mother. Then the longing for his home came crashing upon him in a rush. In the morning he told the Queen of Immortals that he must go and see his father and mother once more. The Queen stared at him with amazement and cried, "Why, Prince, are you out of your senses? It is more than 800 years since your father and mother died. There will not even be their dust remaining." "I must go all the same," he said. "Well, do not be in a hurry," continued the Queen, understanding that he might not be prevented. "Wait until I have made preparations for your journey." So she unlocked her great treasure chest and took out 2 beautiful flasks, one of gold and one of silver, which she hung around his neck. Then she showed him a little trap door in the corner of the room and said, "Fill the silver flask with this water which is below the trap door. It is enchanted, and whoever you sprinkle with the water will become a dead man at once, even if he has lived 1,000 years. The golden flask you must fill with the water here," she added, pointing to a well in another country. "This springs from the rock of eternity. You only have to sprinkle a few drops on a body, and it will come to life again, if it has been 1,000 years dead." The prince thanked the queen for her gifts, and bidding her farewell, went on his journey. He soon arrived at the town where the mist-veiled queen reigned in her palace. The whole city had changed, and he could scarcely find his way through the streets. The palace itself was all still, and he wandered through the rooms without meeting anyone to stop him. At last he entered the queen's own chamber, and there she lay with embroidery still in her hands, fast asleep. He pulled at her dress, but she did not awaken. And then a dreadful idea came over him, and he ran to the chamber where the needles had been kept. But it was quite empty. The queen had broken the last over the work that she held in her hand, and with it the spell was broken too, and she lay dead. Quick as a thought, the prince pulled out the golden flask and sprinkled some drops of the water over the queen. The moment she moved gently and, raising her head, opened her eyes. "Oh, my dear friend, I'm so glad you wakened me. I must have slept a long while." "You would have slept till eternity," answered the prince, "if I had not been here to waken you." At these words, the queen remembered about her needles. She knew that she had been dead and that the prince had restored her to life. She gave him thanks from her heart for what he had done, and vowed she would repay him if she ever got the chance. The prince took his leave, and set out for the country of the bald-headed king. As he drew near the palace, he saw that the whole mountain had been dug away, and that the king was lying dead on the ground, the spade and bucket beside him. But as soon as the water from the golden flask touched him, he yawned and stretched himself, and slowly rose to his feet. "Oh, my good friend, I'm glad to see you," he cried. "I must have slept a long while." "You would have slept till eternity if I had not been here to awaken you," answered the prince. And the king remembered the mountain and the spell, and vowed to repay the service if he had ever had the chance. Further along the road which led to his old home, the prince found a great tree torn up by its roots, and the king of eagles sitting dead on the ground, with his wings outspread as if for flight. A flutter ran through the feathers as the drops of water fell on them, and the eagle lifted his beak from the ground and said, "Well, how long have I been asleep? How can I thank you for awakening me, my dear, good friend?" "You would have slept till eternity if I had not been here to awaken you," said the prince. Then the king remembered about the tree, and knew that he had been dead, and promised, if ever he had the chance, to repay the prince for what he had done. At last he reached the capital of his father's kingdom, but on reaching the place, there was the royal palace had stood. Instead of marble galleries where he used to play, there lay a great sulphur lake, with its blue flames darting into the air. How was he to find his father and mother and bring them back to life? if they were lying at the bottom of that horrible water. He turned away sadly and wandered back into the streets, hardly knowing where he was going, when a voice behind him cried, "Stop, Prince! I've caught you at last! It is 1,000 years since I began to seek you!" And there beside him stood the old white-bearded figure of Death. Swiftly he drew the ring from his finger, and the King of Eagles, the bald-headed king, and the mist-veiled queen hastened to his rescue. In an instant they had all seized Death and held him tight, till the prince should have time to reach the land of immortality. But they did not know how quickly Death could fly, and the prince had only one foot in the border when he felt another grasping from behind, and the voice of Death calling, "Halt! Now you are mine!" The Queen of Immortals was watching from her window, and cried to Death that he had no power in her kingdom, and that he must seek his prey elsewhere. "Quite true," answered Death, "but his foot is in my kingdom, and that belongs to me." "At any rate, half of him is mine," replied the Queen. "And what good can the other half do you? Half a man is no use, either to you or me. But this once I will allow you to cross into my kingdom, and we will have a wager to decide whose he is." And so it was settled. Death stepped across the narrow line that surrounds the land of immortality, and the Queen proposed the wager which was to decide the prince's fate. "I will throw him into the sky," she said, "right to the back of the morning star. And if he falls down into the city, then he is mine. But if he should fall outside the walls, he shall belong to you." In the middle of the city was a great square, and here the Queen wished the wager to take place. When all was ready, she put her foot under the foot of the prince, and swung him into the air. Up, up, up he went, high amongst the stars, and no man's eyes could follow him. Had she thrown him straight up? The Queen wondered anxiously, for if not, he would fall outside the walls, and she would lose him forever. The moments seemed so long, while she and Death stood gazing up at the air, waiting to know whose prize the prince would be. Suddenly they both caught sight of a tiny speck no bigger than a wasp, right up in the blue. Was he coming straight? No. Yes. But was he nearing the city? A light wind sprang up and swayed him in the direction of the wall. Another second he would have fallen half over it, and the Queen sprang forward and seized him by the arm and flung him into the castle. Then she commanded her servants to cast Death out of the city, which they did, with such hard blows that he never dared to show his face again in the land of immortality. Well, that was a strange story. Let's see, how long is this next one? Stonecutter. Oh, okay, it's only another 3-page one. We are almost only halfway through this book. Story-wise, anyway. So our next story for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. The Stonecutter. Once upon a time there lived a stonecutter who went every day to a great rock in the side of a big mountain and cut out slabs for gravestones or for houses. He understood very well the kinds of stones wanted for the different purposes, and as he was a careful workman, he had plenty of customers. For a long time he was quite happy and contented, and asked for nothing better than what he had. Now in the mountain dwelt a spirit which now and then appeared to men, and helped them in many ways to become rich and prosperous. The stonecutter, however, had never seen this spirit, and only shook his head with an unbelieving air when anyone spoke of it. but the time was coming when he learned to change his opinion. One day the stonecutter carried a gravestone to the house of a rich man, and saw all sorts of beautiful things of which he had never even dreamed. Suddenly his daily work seemed to grow harder and heavier, and he said to himself, "Oh, if only I were a rich man, I could sleep in a bed with silken curtains and golden tassels. How happy I would be." And a voice answered him, "Your wish is heard. A rich man you shall be." At the sound of the voice, the stonecutter looked around, but could see nobody. He thought it was all his fancy, and picked up his tools and went home, for he did not feel inclined to do any more work that day. But when he reached the little house where he lived, he stood still with amazement. Instead of his wooden hut, it was a stately palace filled with splendid furniture, and most splendid of all was the bed, in every respect like the one he had envied. He was nearly beside himself with joy, and in his new life the old one was soon forgotten. It was now the beginning of summer, and each day the sun blazed more fiercely. One morning the heat was so great that the stonecutter could scarcely breathe, and he determined that he would stay home till the evening. He was rather dull, for he never learned how to amuse himself, and was peeping through the closed blinds to see what was going on in the street, when a little carriage passed by, drawn by servants dressed in blue and silver. In the carriage sat a prince, and over his head a golden umbrella was held, to protect him from the sun's rays. "Oh, if only I were a prince," said the stonecutter to himself, as the carriage vanished around the corner. "Oh, if I were only a prince, and could go in such a carriage and have a golden umbrella over me! Oh, how happy I should be!" And the voice of the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. A prince you shall be." And a prince he was, before his carriage rode one company of men and another behind it. Servants dressed in scarlet and gold bore him along. The coveted umbrella was held over his head. Everything heart could desire was his, but yet it was not enough. He looked round for something else to wish for, and when he saw that, in spite of the water he poured on his glass, the rays of the sun scorched it, and that, in spite of the umbrella held over his head, his face grew browner and browner, he cried in his anger, "The sun is mightier than I! Oh, if I were only the sun!" The mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. The sun you shall be." And the sun he was, and felt prouder himself in his power. He shot his beams above and below, on earth and in heaven. He burnt up the grass in the fields, and scorched the faces of princes as soon as well as the poor folks. But in a short time he began to grow tired of his might, for there seemed nothing left for him to do. Discontent once more filled his soul, and when a cloud covered his face and hid the earth from him, he cried in his anger, "Does this cloud hold captive my rays? And it is mightier than I! Oh, that I were a cloud, and mightier than any!" And the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. A cloud you shall be." And a cloud he was, and lay between the sun and the earth. He caught the sun's beams and held them, and to his joy the earth grew green again, and flowers blossomed. But that was not enough for him, and for days and weeks he poured forth the rains till rivers overflowed their banks, and the crops of rice stood in water. Towns and villages were destroyed by the power of the rain. Only the great rock of the mountain side remained unmoved. The cloud was amazed at its might, and cried in wonder, "Is the rock, then, mightier than I? Oh, if only I were a rock!" And the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. The rock you shall be." And the rock he was, and gloried in his power. Proudly he stood, and neither the heat of the sun nor the force of the rain could move him. "This is better than all," he said to himself. But one day he heard a strange noise at his feet, and when he looked down to see what it could be, he saw a stonecutter driving tools into the surface. Even while he looked, a trembling feeling ran all through him, and a great block broke off and fell to the ground. Then he cried in his wrath, "If a mere child of earth mightier than a rock, oh, if I were only a man!" And the mountain spirit answered, "Your wish is heard. A man once more you shall be." And a man he was, and in the sweat of his brow he toiled again his trade of stone cutting. His bed was hard and his food scanty, but he had learned to be satisfied with it, and did not long to be something or somebody else. And he never asked for things he had not got, or desired to be greater or mightier than other people. He was happy at last, and heard the voice of the mountain spirits no longer. Okay, the next story is considerably longer, but we are halfway through the book. Oof. And my voice is getting a little hoarse. And it is 10 minutes to the hour, I guess. I guess we can go ahead and find someone to raid for tonight. Let's see, who might be on? Or if anyone has any suggestions. I will gladly consider them. And of course my computer is starting to freeze again. You know, I see someone on that I don't think I've ever actually rated. But they were actually one of the reasons I thought that reading online would be a good idea. So we may rate her. Yeah, I got the gossip for her. So let us go ahead and raid Seneca. Adorable little girl. I will hopefully see you all on the next stream. Good night.